Hello, Ashen Ones, and welcome back to the Fun Reborn. Last time we rang the second bell of awakening in Blighttown and crawled our way back up. We are currently headed to Firelink Shrine with a quick detour through New Londo Ruins, and we will begin this third age with a trip to Sen's Fortress. Before we go to Sen's, we have two storyline developments occurring in Firelink Shrine. The first will be indicated by that glowing soul right there. Our Firekeeper has been ganked by Lotric. We have the means for revenge in that black eye orb right there, and in the meanwhile, we no longer have access to this bonfire, no longer have easy access to those 10 Estus. Kinda sucks, but what are you gonna do? We also have an actual awakening. Frompt shows up. I'm not gonna bother piping back his audio. It's not the most amazing, but it is kind of interesting that the way he pops up both removes the water of the area and blocks the statue of the mother and child that is placed behind him. His model is unsettling. I don't have a lot of insight into it, but it is curious that he's very snake-like with herbivore teeth. Not a combo you would typically see in many animals. But we get our quest, and we get our quest clarified, and we head back on to Sen's Fortress. Before we go in, there are two things to point out. The first is that our buddy Siegmeyer is currently no longer sitting outside the fortress. We helped him to enter by doing his work for him, and so that's great. The second thing is that this river here, the placement of it way outside of our view but vaguely in our awareness, is very similar to the placement of the river at the very bottom of Old Yharnam as we go into the Chapel of the Great Chalice. Good chalice. Best way to start this out is to lure one of them at a time and use the trap plate to shoot them in the back. There's a theme that I don't believe these man-serpents are native to this particular fortress. I think they're more like an invasive species, and you can see that as the area opens up, they're not very good at dealing with the traps. They will get hit by them as often as you do, if not more. As the area progresses, they kind of learn better positions in terms of avoiding trap damage, sort of reflecting a species that have gotten more used to dealing with a somewhat deadly area. They are incredibly armored, and to make it tolerable, it's best to try to backstab as much as possible. Or kick when you're trying to backstab, yeah. It gets less sloppy later on. Their models are pretty interesting. My understanding is that they are very similar, if not identical, to a model that's used in King's Field 4, one of FromSoft's older games. They also kind of resemble the serpent people that you find in Archdragon Peak and Dark Souls 3. It's a little more tenuous of a comparison, but the extended nakes and the serpentine features are pretty reminiscent. We come to the guillotine section, the first of 3 if I recall correctly. And here, once we maneuver him into position, one thing that's nice about them is that they really can't shield break at all. They have not a lot of not a lot of poise damage or stamina damage on their attacks. But we'll just run through. A little risky, but watch. They're really vulnerable to their own traps early on. You'll see that's the second of at least 4 that we killed through some kind of trap means. The Silver Knight statues are foreshadowing to what we're about to see in Orlando. It's almost as if this is a manufacturing plant for them. Just an idea to keep in mind for what potentially this fortress might have represented. One other interesting thing about this area is that many of the denizens will use lightning. There is trap kill number 3. Technically, the first one didn't die to the trap, but it's close enough. Both the Serpent Casters and the Titanite Demons of the area use lightning, and at the bottom you find a lightning spear in a mimic. I sometimes think the mimics are examples of things that societies pick up in order to conquer or survive that ends up dooming them in some way, and the fact that the people who occupy this area all use lightning kind of reflects a set of races that have adopted lightning as their primary means of attack. We have, after a bit, trap kill number 4 right here. I also did not mention, but the serpent down there is just chilling against the wall. It's an amusing bit of foreshadowing as to trap kill number 5. I don't even remember how many we have at that point. There we go. Hey, buddy. We now head to one of the main major storylines of the zone, after we get off of that annoying little incline. One of the interesting things I bring up in the interview is that the slope there's a curve to where the balls path down. That's meant to be in the future a foreshadowing as to future ball paths. But as you can see off, we have our buddy Siegmeyer chilling out. He is perturbed by the existence of these balls and not really going to make much progress until we help him once again.
Oh ho! Ah, where did you come from? Splendid news, I tell you. Ah, so you see my plight. Yes, indeed. I've run up against a wall, or a ball to be precise. I'm afraid I'm a bit too tough to be outrunning those things. So here I sit in quite a pickle, but who knows? Perhaps we'll have another development. Perhaps I could try some rolling. Bah, no chance. My head would spin.
Moving on, we come to a fog gate. My belief is that the fog gate might represent an advance in time. What is kind of noteworthy is that ahead we will come to an area where we can change the path of the balls that roll down. But the path will change on its own when we near this particular fog gate, despite the fact that no one is in that room operating it. Kind of seems strange in that regard, and for me it suggests that they're screwing around with time and space again. But I start to see that everywhere, so. We get the Ring of Steel protection. It is the first bit of the storyline. Night King Rendell. I talk about this more in the writing, but I think that Night King Rendell is part of a elaborate mythos around what this area represents. I think the slashing of a giant drake is very much allegorical, but it probably also ties into, for example, the mythos of Calamite that we'll eventually see in Ulasel. What's noteworthy here is that the man-serpent there does not step on the trap tile, as though once we pass the fog gate, they've become more accustomed to working through this area and not setting off the area's own traps against them. Unfortunately for them, they are still eminently backstabbable. Unfortunately for me, it still takes 4. They become a lot more tolerable as enemies once you get the plus 10 weapon, but I think short of doing the whole Blighttown exploration, that takes a bit. So this is a bit of foreshadowing, highlighting an elevator that exists back there. We avoid the trap. There's a lot of signs that this area was used as a prison. The chains on the walls look like something that people's arms would be chained to, which then makes all of the statues sort of a strange complement. One of the most annoying things is how the balls have a massive hitbox even when they are stationary. I get the physical limitations that lead to that, but... So first we have what is, in some ways, the wrong way to go about this area, because it's extremely difficult to make that run without taking damage. Now here's the alternative path you can take. When we follow the boulder down, it will lead us to some pretty useful rooms. Normally the wall ahead would not be broken, but I've lost the footage of that particular stretch. You wait for the balls to fill that pit and then break through. In this room, you can access the gold covetous serpent ring. Pretty useful item to have, increases your item discovery when you are wearing it. Here we have that mimic chest I was talking about. I mentioned that it has a lightning sphere because, as you'll see, things don't go super well for me this run. Sigh. In there was the lightning spear, as I mentioned, as well as, according to the wiki, a gold coin and silver coin, which are items that have important lore. Anyway, this is the elevator that I mentioned earlier. If you don't get out, you get spiked. It's not ideal, but if you get out in time, we enter another jail cell-looking area and a much safer path to the ball control room. The ball control room. Okay, now that we've done that, we can set the balls to, just shoot out the back of the fortress. Convenient for us, and we move forward through the area. One of the things that getting rid of the balls allows us to is to access this jump much easier without any pressure. We fail the backstab yet again, and then we just kick for good measure. There's signs of a jailbreak here, one of the themes that is, as I've mentioned, hidden throughout the games. It looks as though the wall's been destroyed. Interestingly, it looks like the bars were pushed inward rather than outward. We can also use that to open up a minor a minor shortcut and get some items that introduce the black sorcerers of Vinheim, the School of Dragon magic. The black sorcerers, in my mind, have a sort of ninja feel to them. I think that is probably intentional. Once here, we can leave through the broken jail cell and sort of reset our pathway to the main fortress path. But there is a pit down there that we could jump into. We're not going to take this route, but we're going to explore that area after picking up this item. Slumbering Dragon Crest Ring, another item that ties to the Vinheim Dragon School, and specifically the Black Sorcerer sect inside of Vinheim. With that taken care of, we'll be jumping down into the pit. From the entrance, we have a fairly safe landing zone. Titanite demons aren't the most threatening, but they are pretty boring. And, one slip-up can really dunk your health. I think I will probably fast-forward this. We have better things to do than watch him play Pillar Hump. Like I said, small screw-ups, and you get huge chunks of your health dunked. The other thing I should mention is that the rusted iron ring certainly helps make this area much more bearable. I don't have a good sense of what the floor of this zone is made out of. It doesn't seem thick enough to be like true swamp. And it looks black and metallic. With the first Titanite demon down, we can go up and we can kill the giant who opened the door for us out of pure spite. What a thrill. Okay, so here we are. In front of Sen's Fortress, we get a good glimpse of the first Bell of Awakening. This giant kill is not particularly useful in any fashion, but it does get us a Titanite chunk ahead of time, which is kind of nice to have. Now that we're back in the pit, we can fight the second Titanite demon. The third and fourth are to the right over there. I'll probably be skipping them in this video. I do kill them, but it's not the most fascinating of footage, and we need to make progress really, really quickly in order to keep people from getting bored. It's sort of interesting how the circular pattern kind of looks like wings and almost like a halo as well. Something vaguely angelic about them. I think they also have some similarities specifically to the Copper Demon model. So what was most important for me to come down at this pit is the scythe we'll be picking up very, very shortly. I believe that it is a reference at a game that they intended to make at this point in time, which would eventually become Bloodborne. The description of the item says it was a scythe adapted for battle, which explains why it does not actually look like a scythe. It looks like a bardiche. I hope I pronounced that right. The adjusted for battle to me conveys the idea of Burial Blade specifically, a scythe that is converted into an executioner's weapon. Having to fight snakes in small, tight corridors is frustrating, so luring them back out into an open room is preferable if you're willing to spend the time, especially when your weapon has difficulty penetrating their defenses. This is an interesting zone feature that I don't really have a good explanation for. It looks like an elevator or some kind of garbage dump. We're going to first do the thing you probably ought not to do at this point, because you get pincer attacked if you come this way first. So instead of going to get the item, we'll take another path to another guillotine section, which is interesting in that each guillotine section gets smaller and smaller in terms of the safe pathway over. And how dare that serpent mage try to knock me off? So, the alternative thing you can do, go far enough down the tunnel to lure the serpent mage down the stairs. With the serpent mage taken care of, we can safely get a 1 vs. 1 with the snake guarding the item back there. For our troubles, we get 2 more Titanite shards, large ones specifically. Pretty good pickup. With that detour taken care of, we can finally explore the roof. Another fog gate kind of suggests that we potentially have another time passage, which would explain why serpents no longer populate the roof of the area. We see the giant responsible for dunking those balls down on us that whole time. And we get to this lovely section. The hitbox in that, no matter how many times I come here, always ends up being larger than I initially expect it. And goes down further than I expect it based off of the graphic. Most important thing to do is to get the bonfire, because that makes this next stretch a lot more convenient. From the bonfire, we drop back down and go explore the bottom area, where we get a short Boulder Night storyline. Once again, similar to the Undead Parish, we're dealing with both Boulder Knights and Berenike Knights. Berenike? I'm inclined to give it that Grecian pronunciation, but who knows for sure. A quick look at the Baldur's side sword doesn't give us a ton of super interesting information other than another mention of Night King Rendell and the fact that their kingdom was reduced to ruins after an outbreak of undead. And finally we come to the second Boulder Night. This one, not terribly different from the first, but he is guarding a chest. We open up the chest and we get a Flamestone Ring. To me, it suggests that Boulder dealt with some sort of threat from fire, potentially fighting dragons. Here's that Berenike Knight that I mentioned. It's always amusing how little even the largest weapons in this game can often do to your shield stamina. I do truthfully believe that the risk-reward to shielding versus dodging has improved dramatically in the later games, especially Bloodborne, am I right? One interesting fact about these knights is that this particular one can be a good source of getting more of those large Titanite shards, especially if you have covetous gold serpent ring from before equipped. Moving on, it leads us to a different tower section where we run into Undead Prince Ricard. There's a suggestion based off the armor that the Undead Prince is a member of Astora in some way. We get his identifying rapier from his corpse. It tells us a brief story of the character, specifically the ill-conceived journey north, becoming undead, putting him as sort of a counterpart to Baldur, which fell to undead. And the idea of the monomyth that will become important for my theory later on. As I mentioned, I feel like this area is distinctly allegorical. I don't believe that the undead Prince Ricard is guarding these chests. I in fact think that he's trying to decide between the two of them. Both items that we just got, the Divine Blessing and the Rare Ring of Sacrifice, each represent a distinct goddess, one of them being the goddess of sunlight, and one of them being the goddess of sin, light and dark in a sense. And I am inclined to read that as a decision between two different game conceits. And spoiler alert, I think they chose both. Thanks for that tip, Aldia. With that taken care of, we can return down. Our next course of action is dealing with the Bomb Thor, if only to make that noise stop. We have a couple interesting areas that we're passing by on the way up, but we will get back to them. This particular crossbowman does not appear to have a specific faction. His armor looks very much like Baldur's helmet, but he's not really wearing their colors. The armor of these giants is very peculiar. It almost appears to be made of tiny doors that are stitched together or chained together over a chainmail. For our trouble, we get another Titanite chunk and the ability to no longer have to deal with those exploding boulders. We get some foreshadowing of the boss of the area. In the meanwhile, we're going to head back down and explore some of the side paths. The first thing we have is one last Boulder Knight. His position is very frustrating, and for whatever reason I've actually taken Pyromancy this run, so might as well use it occasionally, I suppose. Use it poorly. Like I said, the previous crossbowman had that sort of similar visor, but did not have the bread cloak. One interesting thing about this is that it feels in some ways almost a mirror of an area that we'll see upcoming in the Painted World. There's two pathways, one below, one above. In the Painted World, the above pathway is blocked by a zombie dragon. So you take the bottom pathway and you fight a Berenike Knight. In this one, the sort of pathways are reversed, with the Boulder Night being at the bottom instead of the Berenike Knight, but the top way being the path that you actually progress through. A little mistakes into miracles. We'll go down and we'll get this item. It's just a sniper crossbow. I don't have a lot to say about it. Making it actually correctly this time, we make it over here, and we come across the merchant of the area, who offers us a little bit of backstory about the zone, as well as a way to buy those undead, those large Titanite shards.
What? Who are you? Another undead, eh? I took on Sam's fortress alone, but I'm no different from those vile creatures. I was driven by conceit. You think you're different? That you can handle it? Yes, I remember that feeling. For I was the same. So, let me help you out, with your soul searching.
He also sells a lot of items that we see throughout the area. The Boulder and Tower shields are the enemies we fight here. The Great Axe is pretty similar to what the boss wields. The black fire bombs are similar to what we're avoiding when we are dealing with the bomb-throwing giant.
There's nothing more to say. I've finished. We're both on the brink, you see. End of story. You bloody fool. Let me give you a nibble of advice. Don't even consider visiting Amorlondo. Not in your state. For a century they've tried and failed. The Night King Rendell, Black Iron Tarkus, and even Logan himself. You won't stand a chance, you'll be eaten alive. But go along if you wish, if only to deepen your despair.
The green blossom is kind of reminiscent of an item we see in Dark Souls 3 tied to the Fair and Undead Legion. I believe they have very similar descriptions and effects, but I'd have to check to be sure. Moving to the bottom, we have the lone serpent man of this entire upstairs area, almost as though the serpent man has been imprisoned himself, or themself, herself, we can't really be sure. But the cage key is extremely, extremely useful. Taking it back to the start, we can use the lever to open the pathway where that serpent man was just chilling out at the beginning. You saw the damage number he took down there. And he's not very smart, so he will just keep taking them. Making this our, 5th trap kill? If I'm not mistaken, all of them prior to the fog gate. As I mentioned, going through the fog gate appears to reset the direction of the rolling balls. But finally, after that silly detour, we have the path that the ball came down through, destroyed that serpent man earlier, and opened the door for us. Opened a door, created a door. Interior decorated a door. At this point in the run, I do not have the cage key, so this is the dialogue you get at that point.
You seem quite lucid. A rare thing in these times. I am Logan. I'm a bit cooped up, as you can see. I have a bright idea. Suppose you set me free. I'm old and empty-handed, but I could pay you with knowledge and sources. This place is melting my mind. The inactivity is repressive.
I imagine Big Hat Logan as a talented but bored programmer. But we do not have the key right now. We can see the path that the ball takes out of the zone. moving ahead to when we have the key.
Oh, heavens! Thank you. I'm saved, and I'd love to resume my travels, but I must log a few things first, and I owe you a favor. I will return to Farling Shrine. Speak with me there, so that I may impart my sorcery. Oh, hello. I'll be along later. Whoa, I'll be just fine, young man.
We can also use the key to get the soul that is sitting in that cage. So now back at the top again, after all of the loose ends have been tied up. One thing that I should have shown off earlier is that a floor below us is a set of cages that can be used as a mechanism to enter the bottom half of the zone from the top half and vice versa. We passed by them on the way up to here previously. Here we get a bit of lore, the summon for Black Iron Tarkus, the same soul that was mentioned by the merchant of the area. Here's a close-up of his appearance. It's kind of amusing that the sword hilt almost looks like a blacksmith hammer. And with the requisite checking each other out completed, we traverse the fog gate and take on the Iron Golem. I decided at first to see if Iron Tarkus can solo it. It doesn't go particularly well. It doesn't go super poorly, but it didn't really look like it was going to happen. That Iron Giant got scoops. This music is excessively intense for what is such a lumbering battle. Up ahead we see an interesting feature of this fortress in that it looks like it led to somewhere at one point but has been bricked off. It's a running theme in Dark Souls of areas that have been blocked in some way that you have to find a bypass for. Another interesting feature of this boss arena is the gargoyle heads statues on the sides of the arena. The Dark Souls 2 DesignWorks interview actually talks about this boss and makes a big deal of the hole in its chest as being a feature that they consider to be very important in the design. I think it's very deliberately meant to invoke an idea of golems being controlled by certain things added to their chest. It's pretty amusing that the Iron Golem tends to try to stomp on you and then gets its foot stuck in the crumbled rubble below it. Good job, Tarkus. As a 2-in-1, it's a fairly easy fight. We get the core, and we get this strange glowing yellow circle. The fact that it's yellow in my mind distinguishes it from the Way of the White Corona, which is very much white. As I mentioned, we have the bricked off passage ahead of us, and we have the gargoyle statues to our sides. There's no real indication of where the bricked passage would have led other than vaguely in the direction of Honor Londo. And so we finally make it to the city where the sun never sets. That will conclude this particular run. Thank you for joining me. Next time will probably be Dark Souls 3, but when we come back to Dark Souls 1, we might not be actually going to Honor Londo immediately. There's a detour that we need to take first. In any case, thanks for watching. So farewell, good hunters. May you find your worth in the waking world.